listener production.
G'day, it's Rusty here, all strapped in for part 2 of my podcast with Russell Ingall. If you haven't checked out part 1, jump back to the library and hit the go button. It's terrific. Lots of reflections on his early years in karts, how he lost that finger. You'll get a real sense of his immense hunger, and I mean immense, rolling the dice on a successful business to have a crack at making it in single-seater racing in Europe, and the Formula One dream. Later, in this second part, the decision to move back home and into supercars, meeting and racing for Larry Perkins. We shouldn't underestimate just how good Russell's achievements were when he joined Perkins full-time, often putting himself in title contention through sheer determination when the tyre wars in those early years arguably didn't always make for a level playing field. We'll talk about Barry Sheene, the Stone Brothers and more. We pick up our conversation on the learnings of life racing in Europe. The games weren't just on the track.
It was being dumb on my part, not being street smart. You know, I had the smarts to make deals work and drive and do all the rest of it, but I wasn't street smart enough outside of the track. And I think people that did make it, and you know, the Mark Webbers of the world and that sort of thing, they either surrounded themselves with people that were street smart and knew how to play the game. Mm-hmm. I didn't, you know, so I didn't know how to play the game. And I'll give you an answer. For example, one of the last rounds in Nürburgring, the new Nürburgring, I qualified on the front row in F3. Pedro Lamy was next to me. He was on pole and he was going for the championship. He had to... if he won that race, he was going to win the German F3 championship. And a guy came up to me with Pedro Lamy and said, look, we're Opel sponsored team. You know, we don't, you know, can we have an arrangement here that, you know, Pedro wants to win this and, you know, we'll make something work for you down the road. And I'm sort of going, these tool bags coming up to me and going, just throw a race or something, you know, just so he can win. I'm on the front row, you know, like one of the biggest races of the year, hundreds of thousands of spectators in front of the... I'll tell you what about you jam that where the sun don't shine and I'll see you on the track, right? As I found out later, the old boy that came up to me, he wasn't old then, but, you know, was Willie Webber, right? Michael Schumacher's manager. Right? Yeah. And Pedro Lamy's manager. So I've just told one of the biggest managers in Europe to go jam it, basically. So probably not the smartest thing to do, you know, in the world. So again, just things like that. And I'm sure they probably, and I think that hurt me a little bit. But the other thing that hurt me was that I got to the end of that, and because of those results, I thought it was going to be I thought it was the European thing was coming to an end. And I had a meeting with the Volkswagen team. And they had actually were one of the most competitive teams. They were a Rolt factory team and ran the Volkswagen factory engines, and they were it. And I had a chance to go in with that team. At the same time, Ralph Furman rang me up and said, right, they've been running their own F3 car, the Van Diemen built one in the Formula 3 with Jason Plato in the British Championship. And we're getting mixed results, but they were getting better. And they said, look, Russell, we got a Japanese backer. He's going to back us to the hilt with this thing, with this F3. They want to drive it. We want you driving it. And we're going to do the European and British Championship. And we want you in the seat. And I sort of went, oh, geez, hang on. Drive here in Germany potentially and one back here, and it's a paid drive. And I thought, oh, damn it. No, I'm going to take the British one because I had in the back of my mind, I've got to go back to Britain. If I win the British F3 Championship, that's going to take me to F1. And went there just before about 2 weeks out from the season starting. The Japanese backer pulled out. Whole program collapsed, and that was it. I couldn't get back to Germany, and I was out. I thought, damn it, what an idiot. And just to rub salt into the wound, the Volkswagen team that year went on to win the German Formula 3 championship. So I thought, so that was, I thought my days were out there, but that rolled in because Ralph felt so guilty about it. He said, well, look, we don't want to see you not have a year with anything. So he paid me to race the new Z-Tech Formula Ford Championship. That's when they used the new twin cam engine. Yep. And that was that big year where we ran 13 or 16 races, won the Formula Ford World Cup at Brands Hatch. And, so that's what led into that. But, that was a game changer because probably if I stayed in Germany, there was a good chance I was going to be definitely the top three, but a good chance of winning that championship. And especially after learning all the tracks for a year, learning how the system worked, that would have been a game changer. That would have been, if I won the German Formula 3 championship, that would have guaranteed me a deal in 3,000, and then you would have been knocking on the door. But one wrong move and didn't happen. But not that I was to know, but again, just not being smart enough, to pick the right game, and whereas probably someone else would have gone, no, don't do that. Stay here, do this. You establish yourself. You're a foreigner that's made a name for himself in Germany. Make the most of it. But again, I didn't have the advice. I was just going on my instincts, and the instincts were wrong. But anyway, that was. But mate, that year in Germany was so cool, and got to do some cool stuff. Cool raced in Monaco. That was outstanding, Greg. Honestly, if there's one story out of all this that probably highlights anything, it's that Monaco, fantastic race, isn't it? Fantastic. And so you imagine again this kid from Adelaide, in this 2-year-old GIO jacket, because that was the only one I was still kicking around in, and it's corduroy, which made it even more bogan. and we're standing in the tunnel because the F3s raced on the Saturday. Yep. And our passes kept us over so we could go out on the Sunday. So I said, okay, all right. So here we are in Monaco. So this outrageous, filthy rich, there were some of the wealthiest people in the world there, biggest motorsport event in the world. And number one, I raced at the track there. I think we finished 9th on the Sunday from 16th or something. So I was pretty stoked about that. And so we had a really good weekend. And there we are standing in the tunnel in a practice session. I remember this vividly. So in those days, you could actually walk through the tunnel. There was a walkway down one side where the officials or the flaggers stand. And so during the practice sessions, you go down and walk through that tunnel. You couldn't stop, but you could keep walking through. So walking through there in a practice session, and you got, Ayrton Senna, Mansell, Prost, all the heroes of that era.
And the great cars.
In those turboed eras, and it was just loud as hell. And I'm sort of standing there going, are you serious? Here's this dude from Australia, from Adelaide, standing here in one of the world's most outrageous events and biggest events, watching Formula One cars that I could just almost reach out and touch. Nice. And I'm walking through again. This is ridiculous, and the whole week it was, and even at nights, I'd grab Julia and we'd go out and get a takeaway or get something. There's not many McDonald's places in Monaco, I can tell you. You wander through this joint and just watch all the massive boats. Everyone's in their tux, and there's piano players on the back of boats, and you're just walking. And we're walking through all this all weekend and just going, man, this is, if it ended tomorrow, I'd be happy, because just doing cool stuff like that.
To have been there.
I lie when I say that, because when then tomorrow came, right, let's go. Let's get back on with the deal. But it was those sort of outrageous things and stuff that, again, not many people know about. But to have the opportunity to do that you never get to do again ever. Number one, to race on that track, but also just to walk around amongst that sort of atmosphere was just unbelievable. So that 92 year in German F3 was probably a major highlight. Everyone talks about Bathurst wins and that sort of thing, but I look back at some of that stuff and go, that's cool, because that will never happen again. not my lifetime anyway. So.
And I'm glad, Russell, that you've paused to appreciate some of the results along the way. You talked about the front row, appearance there at the Nürburgring and some of the drivers that you competed against. And there's even stuff that I digress here for a moment. Things like Macau, where you went 23rd to 5th, battling the likes of David Coulthard. I mean, there's great things like that. Can I pick up on something from your last answer there? You talked about Senna coming through the tunnel. You've talked about wandering around Monaco with Julia. Julia, clearly from an early age, has an eye for photography. She's even now, the landscape shots and things that she does are beautiful. But she strikes up a little bit of a friendship with Ayrton Senna and took some great photos of him. I mean, that stuff is surreal too, Russell, isn't it?
I think he was trying to crack onto it, Greg. I'm actually not sure about this because this was in '91. I did a couple of one-off races in Vauxhall Lotus, which was just below F3, British F3, one make series, and super fast cars. And we, Martin Donnelly, the ex-F1 driver who had that horrific crash and did serious injuries to his legs, he was running a Vauxhall Lotus team. And he offered me the drive. He said, look, do you want to come up and do a one-off at the British Grand Prix in the Vauxhall Lotus? So, hell yeah, let's do it. So, again, I think we qualified in the front row for that as well. So it was amazing. It was just an amazing weekend. And anyway, so he knew that Julia was a photographer, and just to roll back a little bit, Julia actually did photography before we went overseas. That's how we met.
Okay.
Because she was an Australian photographer, and she had deals with Nissan Motorsport and with Brock, with Holden dealer team back when it was then. So she used to do all the press photography for those teams, and that's back when it was old school. So she used to take the photos on the Friday night. She'd be working all night in the development baths. That's what she was. No digital. She was each of your bath, and you put it in, then hang it up on pegs on a line and that sort of thing, and then give it to all the teams on Saturday morning for all their press kits, because that's when she was no social media, of course. So everyone had a press kit with the photos from the Friday practice sessions and that sort of thing. So she was trying to make out a little, a business for herself doing that, and doing very well, and traveled the countryside, and that's how we actually met. She actually stayed at my place for the Australian Grand Prix, and she was photographing for the Australian Grand Prix Corporation. So that's how we actually met and started dating, and that's how it all went. So she had to give up a lot of that when we went overseas and follow me for what I was doing. And so she was doing it just a little bit of freelance stuff, only for herself while we're in England and Europe. And so we're at Silverstone, and Martin Donnelly said, do you want to go over the Formula One pits and have a look around? And I said, well, look, take Julia, because she'll want to take some photos and that, so take her in there. So anyway, so Martin takes her in the Formula One pits, and they're walking around back of Silverstone. Anyway, she comes back and she's like, oh, guess what? So what? Oh, I just sat down with Ayrton Senna, so she's gone up to Ayrton Senna because she had this beautiful, which I can see it from here actually across the room, beautiful picture that she took at the Adelaide Grand Prix, and it was a real stance one, It was really concentrating at the start of a race, and so she wanted it signed. So Martin took her in with a photo and got it all personally signed, and then he said, oh, I'm just about to have a cup of tea. Do you want a tea? So they sat down for half an hour having a bit of a chat and a tea, and she comes back and goes, oh, yeah, I just met Ayrton Senna. We just had a cup of tea. I'm going, serious? Oh, thanks. Thanks for that. Thanks for the invite. So she's just, but I mean, you talk at highlights. I'm sure that's one of hers, because, again, that was her absolute idol in as far as motorsport goes. And she is a serious petrol head, and was Ayrton Senna. So, again, to meet your idol very rarely happens in life, and especially someone like him, and we were in Europe when he lost his life, and it was different again over there, Greg, being in Europe and experiencing that, and it was like I've never experienced anything like it. the devastation and the shock that went through the motorsport community over there was just unbelievable. And then everything that happened after that, it was just, it was just incredible. But to have the chance to actually meet him and that sort of thing. So again, you sort of put that in the memory box and you go, that's pretty cool. that was cool.
Very. I want to get to the Supercars chapter in a moment, Russell, but before we conclude this overseas part of your career, you talked about Ralph Furman giving you the opportunity to go to Formula Ford again, 93, 13 of 16. You talked about that record-breaking year and the festival as well. I mean, that was a huge thing. When you ticked that box, did you hope that the chance to go back to Formula 3 somewhere, or were you hoping that phone call would come, Russell? And what transpired in the wake of that Formula Ford crown?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because of missing out and, like I said, making those wrong calls in F3 and getting the bad news that the British program fell apart. I mean, it's great. I mean, someone like Ralph Furman's stature, who is one of the biggest car manufacturers in Europe, still offered me a deal. I mean, he could have quite easily said, "Oh, sorry, lights out," but at least he offered me something, which was great, and that's a relationship that we had. I realised, because it was taking a step back again from F3, that I had to make it count. And the thing is, and what went against me anyway was my age. I was getting too old at that stage to be going backwards. I knew I had to keep progressing forward. So I had that age thing, which was an issue for me. I never thought of it but unfortunately in the outside motorsport circles it did. And so I knew I had to punch it out the park, like not just win, like smash it. And I realised if I was going to do it, that's what I had to do. And that was the mindset all along. Didn't matter what. And I took some massive risks on the track. But again, it's the learning experience of, if you're about to take an uppercut, make sure you can duck, and I was ducking a lot. And it was an outstanding year. And I think that's what at least gave me another year or two in the game, was because of that year. Because if I didn't get any results there or just got a place, that would have been it. She would have been on the slow ship back to Oz and lights out. So that was a massive year. But again, it was the competition was fierce, and that World Cup at Brands Hatch. Again, you talk at special moments and highlights of careers, and to have your name up at, they call it the Kentagon there at Brands Hatch, because it's shaped like a 50-cent piece. This bar, pub, eatery right in the middle of Brands Hatch, and they got a big plaque up on the wall, and all those plaques, and you look at it, and it's Jensen Buttons, Ayrton Senna's, think of Mansell, any of the big names that you'd think of, there all are, and then there in the 1993, Russell Ingall. I'm going, yeah, look at this. I mean, that's, it's pretty. That was a pretty big deal for us in total, but the event as such was just, you got hundreds of Formula Fords just there, and it's just a knockout heats. You're just in there, and each heat, you don't win that heat, you're out. So it was just insane, the level of competition for it, and it's just unfortunate that you can't share that with other people at the magnitude of it. Because you just say, it's a Formula Ford race. What a Formula Ford race like this was.
Best in the world.
Unbelievable. Oh, it was. It was. And they used to get drivers come back from other categories, from Formula 3000, from Formula 3, used to come back to Formula Fords just so they could do the festival. That's how big it was. So you had named drivers in there as well. And she was. That was a big event. But again, there was two things: winning the event itself, unbelievable, and the championship. But secondly, the byproduct of that is it kept me in the game still. Okay, rightio. We're back in the game. Got me in the Japanese drive in F3, and she was back. And then Formula Renault after that, and was continued on. At least I was still in the game, still fighting. But I was running out of time. And I knew it. So probably the stage towards the end of Europe. That's when I had to make the call. Well, the call was made for me because after that win in '95, that was a call. But it was mate. It was difficult to step away because once you step away from Europe, you never go back. That's it. It's lights out. And when you look at all the effort and the dodging and the stealing and everything else that went with it, to walk away from that was bloody hard. It was sometimes you wish you still had it go, but at that stage it was, British Touring Car Championship was really hard to get into. There was a few options there that might have been but the unfortunate part about it, the Formula One dream was fading. And from that point on, from 93 on, and that was hard because that was a goal. Formula One was a goal. And it might have seemed a bit heady, but, to this day, I still believe if I made the right calls and got there, I reckon I could have done it. I don't know whether that seems a bit egotistical or not, but I wouldn't have gone to all that effort if I didn't think it was. Yeah. I wouldn't have put my whole life on hold and on the line if I didn't think I could do it. And I think ability, I know ability. I had it. Like I said, I just wasn't street smart enough. But anyway, you live and learn on that one.
The Enforcer was also a 1976 Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood film. Imagine Dirty Harry drove a supercar as well? That would be the ultimate enforcer.
You touched on the difficulty of making the call. Just firstly, my ears pricked up there a moment ago. Can you share which potential British touring car teams may have been interested in you before you made the big move back home and a great career in supercars?
Yeah, unfortunately, again, the way my luck rolls, I had a pretty serious test and a lot of discussions throughout the year with the factory BMW team with Vic Lee. Unfortunately, Vic Lee got done that year for drug smuggling, cocaine in air cylinders across from Europe into Britain. So that didn't work out so well. It definitely didn't work out so well for him. I'm not sure whether he's still taking a holiday or not. Yeah, so hence that team folded. So that was one of the tests, and I was pushing hard with the Ford team, who Craig Baird. Craig Baird was driving the Mondeo for a lot of years and that. So I was sort of angling towards that because of the Formula Ford connection. But again, it was one of those things where it was just bad luck. The person I was negotiating with in at Ford Europe ended up leaving that position. Someone new came in. So again, it just wrong place, wrong time. It seemed to be a bit of a consistent thing. I'm going, damn it, every time I jiggle, I'm jiggling the wrong way here. So, so that didn't. But that again, the British Touring Car Championship was, because the Formula Ford Series used to follow it, outstanding. Like some of the racing was ridiculous how good it was. So I was sort of interested in that because I looked at it as a Formula Ford with a body on it. So I think, and it was hard racing, so I think I would have really enjoyed that side of it. But probably inside of me as well, I still wasn't ready to give up the open wheeler dream yet. So I probably didn't push as hard as I should have, because I still had in the back of mind I could still do it. But, as it turned out, it didn't roll that way.
Just expand on the turning point for you then, Russell, because Larry Perkins has detailed at functions that you and I have been to about, the tragic loss, obviously, of Greg Hansford, who'd had success with him at Bathurst in 93. There was an opportunity for a new co-driver with Larry Perkins, one of the all-time greats of touring car racing in this country. I mean, to partner up with LP for the great race, huge opportunity, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's what changed the path, getting that call. Like I said, in our little, 2-bedroom semi-detached house in Peterborough over in UK, and getting that call there. First time I thought it was a prank when he rang, because it was a typical...
What did he say?
What do you reckon Larry Perkins would have said?
G'day, cock. What are you doing for Bathurst?
You got it. Straight out. And I thought, one of my mates back in Australia having a bloody run at me here. So I said, who's this? Piss off. Like, and he's gone, it's Larry. Oh, hi, Larry. How you going? And he's... so he threw that one at me, and I said, well, yeah, absolutely. I've got nothing too much on the table now. So there was no intent at that stage to go back to Australia, right? Not at all. I was still working on trying to get another drive, right, for 95. So I was still working on that. I'd raced Japanese Formula 3 in that year, and I was sort of semi-living there and semi-commuting back to, because Julia had a pretty good job with IBM in UK. So she stayed in UK, and I was sort of spending months at a time in Japan and then coming back in between. But the intention was to still try and keep going. So I had no intentions to come back.
Clearly that resonated with Larry too, Russell, because he'd done similar hard yards. That was a path he admired, clearly. Yeah, it was. And that's and later on, I did ask him why I got the call, and that's what he said. There's two things. It was exactly what you said, because he regarded anyone that took a swing overseas and was successful at it, he regarded really high, because he knew, again, this is rolling right back to what I said earlier on at first parts of our discussion about the level of competition was so high. He said, if you can go right over there, you can go right anywhere. So that was his first call. The second call was again, not too many people know this, and probably the biggest one, believe it or not, and it shows you the character of Larry Perkins. They had a lineup of everyone at Sandown of all the Formula Ford champions, right? Awesome.
Over the period of time. I think it was before one of the touring car races, or I can't remember what the event was for. And all I know is that Sandown was standing at the Armco, and we're all lined up, and Larry was next to me. Going, okay, right. Anyway, so they had all the Formula Fords lined up, and there was some of the other younger ones too that were there, and Larry, he made an off-the-cuff comment standing next to me about, I was talking to him about Formula Fords, and they're a bit, what they like to drive compared to what his, and he made it off-the-cuff. He said, and he looked down at like 3 or 4 of us lined up there and said, look, I could probably jump in one of these things and probably still kick your backsides, And and then the 3 guys next to me, the 3 kids next to me, they sort of went, okay, Larry, and sort of looked away and looked down. And I just turned around and looked at him and said, Larry, anytime you're ready, mate, anytime, and we'll have a go, because good luck with that, all right? So just straight down, gun barrel, pointed straight at him, right, straight at him. And he's just going, all right. And he's turned around. And he reminded me of that. And this was years after. And he reminded me of that and said, you know what? How I know that you actually had it is because all those other drivers shied away. You're the only one that came back at me.
Not daunted.
No, if you did that, you're not worried about anything. I said, that's what I want driving my car. I went, okay. Just that one thing. So there you go. So I did a lot of things wrong. That one I got right. So and that's why I got the drive.
So you still have the European thing burbling away. Julia's in England, as you said, and a great chance comes up with Larry. At what point was it the Bathurst win in 95? What was it? What was the point where you went, I've got to get on this bandwagon? This touring car come supercars thing is going to take off. It'll be good for me. Did you just feel like you couldn't get that last break in the open wheeler side of things in Europe? What was the stopping point?
Age.
Yeah,
my age. I suddenly come to the realisation, I sort of was getting up into the sort of mid-20s, and I got back from that Bathurst win, which I never expected. So I never expected that when I packed my bags from Peterborough, jumped on the plane at Heathrow, and that I'd be rolling back with, a trophy, winning the biggest race in motorsport.
Mega achievement, Russell. Given, like you talked about the nosebleeds before and how it made you feel to conquer the mountain, that must have been mighty.
You know what though? I found it really easy.
Did you?
I found it easy because of what happened on that first lap. Because all of a sudden I went from having the world on my shoulders to here's this dude that's been racing over in Europe. Yeah, seems to have a bit of talent. Overhearing, I overheard a few journalists on the grid before that start of that race in 95 comment that, again, you talk about fire in the belly, comment that, who do you think your chances are? And they went through, and Glenn Seaton and, Scaife and, they got to Larry's car and they said, oh, yeah, Larry's always in with a shot. And they said, yeah, but, his co-driver's got no experience. He's probably going to let him down. And this was in earshot, probably not knowing that I was listening. I go, oh, really? Okay. All right, take that on board. So that was one thing. I thought, I don't respond well to that sort of stuff. And then the second part was what happened on lap one. Because when that tyre went down, we went a lap down, all the pressure was gone off of me. I could go out and if I shunted the thing, you know what? You shunted it because you're having a go. So there was no pressure all of a sudden. So every stint that I drove in that car, I was just giving it a a lot bigger than I probably would have if we were leading the race or in contention normally. But there was no pressure. So I could just go out and do what I did best and not worry about anything. So in hindsight, it actually probably worked out best because it made me, Larry done it plenty of times. It made no difference to how he was going to approach the race. I was a bit different because I'm sharing a car with someone that's expected to win the race and one of the biggest names in motorsport. So bit of pressure there for someone, for a relative novice, So, but that took that all away. So the way it panned out probably helped us win that race, that I could actually have a big swing at it without the pressure of, of stuffing it up,
Massive, Russell. Absolutely massive. So the Supercars chapter for you rates, very highly with lots of fans. You've talked about, age being sadly a big determining factor in the European thing ceasing. But what opens with that Bathurst win with Larry, with partnerships with various organisations that you've talked about already was the start of something very special for you. When did the Enforcer tag come along, and who kind of christened that? I sense it's a journo. Yeah,
you're dead right. Paul Gaver was the one that kicked that off, and there was a lot of reasons towards it too, because like obviously after the 95 win, and I went back to UK. Larry rang back up again and said, "Look, we've got to drive for you full time if you want it. Castro, I want to put it on a second car because he was only a solo car runner, and it's there if you want it." And there was nothing else happening, nothing solid in Europe. Like I said, the age thing was always a concern, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm old here, but I'm young in Australia, and so between all of us, we just decided that was going to be the gig. So packed up bags, which was a hard call, Greg. It was It was hard after punching away for that long, and we did it. So we thought, oh, okay, well, let's have a go. It could be worse things in the world to do, and probably timing was right. So for once, I did get the timing right. Because that's when supercars were starting to change, and the whole. The way it was being marketed and the inception of supercars was happening, the tag. So it was a good time to do it. And, so it was the two-car team, roll back.
What did he say to you about a wage? I bet that was, now look, there won't be a huge amount of money, cock, in this.
Serious. That's what makes me laugh a bit with some of the young guys now when they're going out. They're probably whinging about you're only going to pay me a couple $100,000. Trust me, I reckon I would have got more money. I reckon selling ice creams out the front of Surfers Paradise there. It was, she was pretty slim, but you know what? I know people always say to me you just, you're always in it for a buck, or, I'm wheeling and deal a lot because that's what I've always done since I was a kid. Wheeled and dealed, whether it be working on mates' cars or buying and selling cars or buying and selling parts, that's the way I've always been. But at the end of the day, I took that drive for ridiculous money. I probably could have gone somewhere else for more money. Mm-hmm. But I did it because, number one, Larry gave me the break to do it. He was the one that gave me the opportunity when others clearly didn't and wouldn't, and I wanted to drive for him. So you can say what you want and all the rest of it, or others can, but, I did that for the reason, not the money. Yep. And definitely not for the money. but again, you got to look long term. I realised if I'm going to make a long term career out of this is where I'm at now. Forget Europe. Not going to be a Formula One star. That's life. Get on with it. If I'm going to make a go of this, I got to. And learning from what I've learnt overseas about what I said earlier about S3, not positioning myself right. Mm-hmm. So this time I'm going to position myself right. Okay.
Get on the bandwagon.
Yeah. This time I'm going to get it right. So get with the right people, make it right, make it for the right reasons, and because it's going to be the rest of my career. So this time, do what you learn. So I definitely did that time, and that's why. But he was not known for spending $1 off. But again, that was good because, like you said, he's not going to spend money on palm trees. He's going to spend it on making fast cars.
Exactly.
Cars is what got 4 runners up in the championship, 2 Bathurst wins. So you take that all day long over palm trees. That's for sure.
Most definitely, and it was the beginning of a huge rise in the popularity of the sport. Was the Enforcer nickname? And we love that sort of stuff. I mean, I think Paul Radisich was the Rat. There were all these nicknames that started to come through it. Was that both, in terms of character, of the commercial side of it, a blessing, obviously, but did it come with some, challenges, I guess, as well, in terms of perception and things like that?
To ask your question a bit earlier, Paul Gover was actually, who's a journalist, actually came up with it and mentioned it in a couple of columns, and we used to talk about it a bit, and he said about the black hat and the white hat, because everyone wanted to be the next Peter Brock. No one wanted to be the Alan Moffat, who was seen as the aggressor, and I said, well, look,
sport needs that, Russell, doesn't it? It needs that.
It's about personalities, and you know that better than anyone. I mean, you've been part of the media for so long, I mean, that's what you guys want to talk to someone that's got something to say, at the end of the day. And so I was quite happy to roll with that, and I could see the commercial sense in it. And also, it wasn't far from the truth because of the atmosphere that I just come from. I just come from, racing in some of the world's toughest categories with some of the world's toughest drivers and harshest environments. And I was sharp. I came back and it was like, there's only one spot, and that's that fresh air out front. I'm not going to be sucking up exhaust fumes from someone else. I'm going to be giving them, So, and that was a mentality I come with. And it rubbed a lot of people up because when I came back here, there was still a lot of the owner races going on. So people were Dick Johnsons and, people who owned the cars, owned the team, were still racing, and so you took it to heart a bit if they got, banged up a bit or, and they couldn't deal with it initially. I felt that because I came back and I was pretty aggressive and because that's the way I've always raced. I didn't do it to rub people up the wrong way or whatever. That's where I've come from. I come from kill or be killed.
Yes.
So and a lot of people that and a lot of the public couldn't get their head around that. So I think the whole Enforcer thing started coming along and started rolling and making a bit more sense in the respect that it probably took a little bit of that pressure off where people were started to warm to it and go, over the years and go, oh, yeah, well, we get on board with that. A lot of people used to hate it too, so you got just as much as hate mail as you did, friendly. But at least that's what you want. No one wants warm and fuzzy all the time. The only way a sport works is when you got like, dislike. You got controversy, and I seem to somehow fall in the middle of all of that a lot of the time. But it also had its downsides, I believe. A lot of people probably in some of the in some certain areas and positions that might listen to this might think not, but or not agree with it, is that the trouble is with having a tag like that, sometimes I could have been sitting in the grandstand and I would have got blamed for something that happened out on the track, and I think that sometimes rolled down into individuals that probably had a bit of influence within certain decisions that were made on track. And when I look back at some of the championships that I lost by only a few points, and then I look back at some of the events that I got penalties for or whatever, and I look back at that and go, you know what? If it was in today's environment, it'd be a non-event. That penalty wouldn't have applied, or would have been. Again, I think it was a leftover from the gentleman racing thing. To people couldn't get their head around real hard racing, and some of the people making decisions of that era couldn't get their head around it as well. Some probably should have, and should have known better, I believe. And like I said, it's only my opinion, but at the end of the day, I know it cost me a couple of championships of decisions that were made, and so I paid a penalty for being the enforcer, I believe. But on the upside of it, there was a lot of pluses too, and it got a good following out of it, and people liked it, and as it went on, and I believe it transitioned into, especially now, they're starting to realise if you want controversy, if you want entertainment, it's got to start on the track. Got to start on the track. You can't watch a good rugby or league match, without having tackling. If you took the tackling away, it'd be pretty average.
Absolutely.
Pretty average game. And you got to have it with this. And I think, and I believe it's changed now, people getting their head around it as time went on. But back then it was hard work, and you got chastised a bit about it, So it was, but it was, I never regret it. I never would go back and change my style or how I did it. And if I like someone, I have respect for, and that's the difference. I always have respect for people. If I didn't like someone, I'd tell them, and I'd tell them straight to their face. But if I like someone or liked the way they drove, or I respected them. And I never had issues with people that I respected. I never had problems with the likes of someone like Dick Johnson or Peter Brock. And I raced against them, and because I respected them and what they'd achieved as racers, there was a lot that I did that I didn't, and hence I wasn't shy about letting them know that on the track. So. So that I think there's definitely a difference there. You got to still have respect for your competitors as well. The ones that have earned respect. So
cool. 2 Bathurst wins, which were mighty and only a couple of years apart. Is one of them a favourite for different reasons? And I love the post-race vision of you and things like that. What it meant to you, Russell. All those hard yards in Europe, and knowing how significant those moments would be for the decade or more still to come in your supercars career.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And they still, like I said, there's moments in time with, like I said, about Monaco and Macau and the Formula Ford World Cup and Festival. They're all up there with the Bathurst, but in a different way. But then you get to the Bathurst and even now, getting on quite a few years ago, the amount of people that recall that you bump into, whether it be a restaurant or a pub or just at a racetrack, and they recall that. It shows you the how the enormity of that event as such. Hence, probably why I used to get nosebleeds all the time. But the enormity of it to the public,
Yes.
and you probably don't realise that until decades after, and then people will still remember it, still go on about it and go, Jesus, okay. And even a younger generation of motorsport fans who have gone back and looked at those races and go, hey, that was pretty cool. So it never stopped sinking in. I think it definitely was hard to take back then of what had just happened, but then it never stops. It keeps going. You never get sick of it. And they definitely. I mean, look, make no mistake, championship was good, because as a race driver, that's what you always want to win, because that's a year's worth of work. Not just one week. That's a year's worth of work. But you always put Bathurst on a pedestal, that's for sure.
Most definitely. Barry Sheene would feature significantly in your life, mate, and you wrote about this very recently. He would have been 70 not long before we recorded this podcast, which is crazy. He'd still be as mad as ever and having a good laugh, which is great. Just share with people, if you can, the impact he did have on you and why you guys got on so well, and the ultimate move that you did to Ford, the big switch that you did to Ford. He played quite a part in it, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, firstly, what a great guy. I mean, you were great mates with him too, Greg, on a both a personal and professional level, and it's just a massive loss, to I think to society as well, because you don't get too many Barry Sheenes. And some of the honestly, if we had another hour here, there's got some cracker stories, but he was definitely a man with a key to the world, that's for sure. So we just struck up a friendship over there. I think we got along well because of the way I went about racing, the European side of it as well, because obviously he'd raced all through Europe, and okay, on two wheels, not four, but knew the challenges as well. So I think he was one that could appreciate that, and both pretty knockabout sort of people. So we struck up a friendship there, and he started giving me some just advice on motorsport in general and the game. And again, I didn't need advice on how to drive. I knew you never knock back advice on how to stay in the game and how to do the game better outside the car. And he used to give me advice on that all the time. And he always, we holidayed with him. So when we were living in Melbourne, we used to come up and stay at his place at Carrara. And he always was on to me about moving up here. He said, you got to move up here. You got to move up here. I said, well, can't. I've got to live near the team, and that's the gig. You got to be in the same state as your team. All these drivers that stay away from not to live in the same state as their team, no good. You got to stay. If you want to be dedicated, you got to be in there. And he said, well, great, we'll just change teams. Good on you, Baz. Yeah, just change teams. And lo and behold, off he goes and starts, I've got some meetings with you. And long and short of it, when the time came, and I think I'd run the course with Larry, and Larry wanted me to stay, and it was a little bit tense there for a while, but at the end of the day, I was looking at a championship, and he knew that. I think deep down he knew the time was probably up, and 7 years was a fair innings, and I think we'd repaid each other back
handsomely,
So it was a good deal. But anyway, it was time to go. So Barry had been behind the scenes and been talking with Ross and Jimmy Stone and been talking with Ford, and he'd be going,
oh, you got to get Russell. Exactly
right. And it was just, and because you can imagine the meetings with him, because he would have walked in, you do your Pommy accent a lot better than I do mine, and I'm a Pom. And he would have gone into Ross and Jimmy Stone and done exactly that. Just get him, just sign him,
Yeah.
And anyway, so we ended up, believe it or not, it was some of my deals, and I'll tell you about the Super Cheap. Remind me to tell you about the Super Cheap one later. But we did the deal with Ford, and so we got talking with Ross and Jimmy. He said, "Yep." So we got agreed on paper, what the deal was going to be, and then we went to Ford, and Ford wanted to do a deal, and so we met up with Jeff Pilates at Ford,
the then boss of Ford. Yeah,
honestly, one of the best guys. I mean, I've met a lot of directors, CEOs, and of companies. Seriously, he was a star. It's such a sad loss. Such a great bloke. A bloke that ran one of the biggest motor companies in Australia, right? And would drive himself. Could have drivers. Got a Hollywood limos. Used to get an XR8, drive to and from work. And rev up in front of his neighbours.
Kept it real.
Great bloke. We met him down here at Marina Mirage, down at SeaWorld there. He was down here on holidays with his family, said, let's meet up. Went down with Baz, had lunch with him, had a coffee, thought thongs, not a suit in sight, shorts and thongs, whatever, sat there for an hour, nodded out a deal, shook hands. That was it. That was the deal. Amazing. So he's a guy that runs, like I said, runs Ford Australia. And here we are in thongs doing a multi-year deal, and bang, just like that. But again, it was cool, because not lawyered up, no accountants in sight, just bang, there it is, do the deal. And that was it. And we came away, went back to Baz's place, and we sort of looked at him and said, oh, guess we're moving. And that was it. So, we're still living in Melbourne at that stage. So, we ended up buying a block of land up here and building a joint and moved up here and been up here ever since. But, so he was a card, but, he was very instrumental in putting that deal together. And out of that came that elusive championship, and after 4 times being runner-up, I was getting a bit edgy, I can tell you. So.
I'll bet you were. Brett Murray talks about getting you with a PR stunt in a wedding dress on the front page of the Adelaide Advertiser to shake the bridesmaid's tag. What did you say to him when he pitched that one at you?
Oh, you can imagine what I said when he called. Because we're in Adelaide driving around doing the usual PR gigs before the race, and he throws that one at me. I said, Brett, you're seriously on drugs. Like, I don't know what you're taking, but they're not mind enhancing. Like, she ain't happening. She ain't happening. And he said, well, look, here's the deal. If you don't do it, they're going to put Scaife with a story about Mark Scaife about something or other. It'd be something trivial.
Front page of your hometown or your old hometown?
They're going to stick him on the front page if you don't do it. And so phone went quiet for probably a couple of minutes. And I said, you're a mongrel crusher. That's my nemesis. That's my weak spot. Anything to undermine Scaife, I'm in. All right. So that was it. So in the end, we went down to this damn dress shop and adorning the hairiest pair of legs you've ever seen in your life. And, so we put this dress on and, off we go. So one and only time I've done a bit of cross-dressing, but anyway, we did it. And, anyway, got front cover. I'm not sure it's such a good idea or not, but, things you got to do, mate?
Most definitely.
But it worked. It worked. We shook the bridesmaid.
You did. I think he even made a bridesmaid's dress for the celebration at Phillip Island, or had someone make it. And Ross Stone got a bit nervous because it was a red dress, and I think you guys were going to cut it. And Ross thought it might have had like a Holden, undertone or something, and that wasn't what it was. It wasn't what it was about at all, was it?
Ross got very nervous about it. I tell you, Ross, because they're fantastic team owners, car builders. The dynamic between those two are incredible, considering two brothers, because usually brothers try to bloody kill each other. They got along so well because each of them had their place. Ross ran the show, Jimmy was on the spanners. So, and neither of them conflicted between the two. They just got on, and that's why they were so successful. But Ross in particular was so nervous about. He was the worst for reading fan comments, and he used to drag me on all the time. I just picked up a magazine. I see all these fan comments, and they seem to be a little bit. I said, Ross, it's 10 people. All right, don't worry about it. So, but you maybe you should not do that or apologise. I said, don't. But he was always paranoid about anything negative. So I said to Ross, mate, you're probably going to have a fair bit coming at you, over the years. So you're probably going to have to relax a little bit on this one, because it's just the way I roll, and it's going to be, mate, you'll get race wins, but you're going to probably cop a few PR nightmares. And just after I said that, a little incident in 2003 cropped up, which that got him going. He that caused him a few sleepless nights, I think, that one, because he doesn't like any waves, Ross. He likes everything to run smooth. And when you all of a sudden you get a few things thrown at you, he didn't know how to handle that one. Yeah, 03 was a bit of a challenge.
That's the end of part 2 of my podcast with Supercars champion and Bathurst winner Russell Ingall. Now, normally this would be the checkered flag for another episode, but you're in luck. Russell, as you can tell, is enjoying the discussion, so he's kindly going to stick around for even more. We have a third part for you with the great man. Head back to the Rusty's Garage Library and fire up part 3. He talks frankly about the future of supercars. How he did that championship-winning burnout while hanging out the side of the Falcon. Don't try that at home. One of the most talked-about incidents in the history of the sport, and how deep the rivalry ran with Mark Skaife. Some reflections on his time in TV, and he tackles some of your questions.